Hey, what's going on, everybody? Witticism here. Happy Wednesday. I thought I would go through this article by the Gothemist, which is a nonprofit newsroom powered by WNYC, which is public radio in New York. This is an article explaining what to do if someone is in crisis on the subway. Wow. Mental health workers explain what to do. So let's see their solutions, see if they have any at all. Since Jordan Neely was strangled to death on the subway this week, social media has been awash with New Yorkers discussing how they would react to a person who appears to be in a medical or mental health crisis. So right away, a lot of labels, a lot of normalizing language. We don't call these people crazy or drug addicts or kooks. We have to say they're just going through a mental health crisis. Which, what does that even mean? If you're a psychopath and you're going to kill people, is that a mental health crisis? I don't know. Gothemist spoke to mental health workers and advocates about how they would respond in this type of situation and what members of the public can do from keeping situations from ending in tragedy. Their responses highlighted some of the challenges these scenarios present and the limitations of New York City resources. And while there was no consensus on the right approach to take, they all urged compassion. They don't have the answers at all, but, at the very least, you could just be happy while you're being stabbed to death on the subway. I was always taught to treat it as you would any emergency with a family member or a loved one or a neighbor, said Rebecca Lynn Walton, a social worker and chief clinical officer at Services for the Underserved, a nonprofit organization that provides behavioral health services, including to people who are homeless. People don't have to be housed to be our neighbors. That's all these people have, is platitudes. It's like Kamala Harris is telling us how to handle the homeless. For many New Yorkers, encountering someone who is agitated or appears to be in crisis on the train is an everyday occurrence. Why is that? While that can be frustrating for some strap hangers, many have cautioned against accepting violence against those who appear to be homeless or have a mental illness. Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to watch out because you might start getting close to a solution, and we can't have that. So it has to be made taboo. It's frustrating, but the last thing you want to do is solve this thing. City officials have no clear answers for how subway riders should react. Mayor Eric Adams has so far declined to condemn the violence against Neely, even after his death was ruled a homicide by the medical examiner. Adams issued a statement Wednesday that noted there were serious mental health issues in play. Asked on CNN how a commuter should respond in this type of situation, Adams said, "We cannot blanketly say what a passenger should or should not do. The investigation into who killed Neely is ongoing, and few details have been released about what happened in the lead up to Neely's homicide." How is this neutral language? This is a journalist. It's like Aaron McIntyre says, no matter how much you think you hate journalists, you still don't hate them as much as you should. Homicide. I mean, this man is going to be on trial, and this is the language that's used about him. How is that fair? How is that fair to him? Experts say it's untrue that people with mental illnesses are disproportionately likely to be violent to others. Experts say, well, then I guess it's just the Bible then. It's just the most true thing that's ever been said. We should just never question it. I mean, there's no way, everyone experiences kooks on the train every single day, but it's not true that these people are disproportionately likely to be violent to others, even though every day you see with your own eyes that they are the most violent and unstable people on the trains. Most people with mental health conditions are no more likely to be violent than anyone else. The sky is green, and only 3 to 5% of violent acts can be attributed to individuals living with a serious mental illness. From places like Northwestern University and Johns Hopkins, convey how the media's overemphasis on the connection between violent acts and serious mental illness can lead to prejudice against people with those conditions. Oh my God. You might start to feel serious enough about this to actually do something. Don't want that. When to engage and when to walk away. If you feel personally threatened, then you should switch subway cars or walk away, said Matthew Kudish, CEO of the local chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. But he emphasized that no two people or situations are the same. If you have met one person with mental illness, you've met one person. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to care or support or help. There's just nothing we could do. There's no patterns. There's nothing you need to recognize. Don't notice. Don't notice. There's a war going on out there against you from noticing stuff because the conclusions that you come to are dangerous. I did this when I made an episode on the Jews and Mark Levin. That's exactly what Mark Levin says about the Jews. No, they're not a group. That's not a community. They don't act in group interests. It's one person. I like to view them as the individual. But anybody knows that if you are trying to find a pattern, you don't look at one of one. That's not how you do that. He's literally telling you to not look at patterns. You've only met one. There's only one. We're all God's children. We're all special butterflies. No one is the same. If you've seen 5 people all acting in the same way, that's just a big coinky-dink. Commuters shouldn't assume that they know what someone's going through if they are acting agitated or upset. In some cases, someone's behavior might be a cry for help. There are occasional moments where people are upset. Something might have been triggered where they got into an argument with somebody, or they might not be getting their needs met. Young said she responds by trying to have a calm conversation and make a connection. Wow. In Neely's case, for example, she might have said, "What do you need? How about we take a walk? Why don't we talk about what's going on with you, and if there's anything I can help you with? What's your name? My name is Nancy." If this is not proof that we live in a gynocentric world, I don't know what is. Young acknowledged that might not be the easiest thing to do when someone is acting erratically and trying to stab you to death on the subway, but she said that person who's in this situation, who might seem scary, might just actually need to connect with somebody. Kudish pushed back on that approach for those who don't have any special de-escalation training. If you feel unsafe in the subway or anywhere else, you should do the best you can to remove yourself from that situation. In this instance, I would suggest that people explore leaving the train car. He added that everyone has their own boundaries. I'm a social worker by training and education, and I wouldn't intervene if I didn't feel safe. What a wimp. No one feels safe. You think the Marine felt safe? No one feels safe. What is courage? Courage is not an absence of fear. Courage is pushing past the fear. The fear is fully there. That's what bravery is. You know that the fear is there and you just go into it anyways. I wouldn't intervene if I didn't feel safe. And when do you feel safe, Mr. Kudish? Never? What happens when you call 911? If someone appears to be in distress, commuters can alert the conductor or call 911, although police officers are often ill-prepared to deal with mental health crises, and some encounters have ended tragically. Lynn Walton previously served as a behavioral health official at NYC Health and Hospitals and has participated in one of the city's subway outreach teams. She said she's provided people with assistance such as shelter referral, but in case of an emergency is always aware of where the conductor is on the train. I've definitely reached out to the conductor, she said. I have also called 911 many times. Lynn acknowledged that some of the people are scared to call 911 for someone in a mental health crisis. In recent years, police have shot some people during such incidents. This was recently the outcome for Raul de la Cruz in the Bronx after his father called 311, a non emergency city hotline. Now, I want to talk about Raul de la Cruz because this is a great example of how insane they are. Okay? According to the story, police say around 10 a.m., a father called 911 saying his adult son was having a medical episode. Okay? The father said the son felt like he was being followed and prosecuted. Now, in other stories, what they said was the dad called 311, but the dad didn't speak English. This guy also did not speak English. No one spoke any English. And you cannot find out if these people are illegal or not because the media flat out just refuses to include that in the story. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'll say that this guy was here illegally. Well, his dad called and they didn't understand him. They called 311 and he blabbered on and they were like, just call 911. So he called 911. Police say the father also said the son stated, "If any cops show up here today, I will kill them." 2 cops and fire arrived in front of the location. They are met by the father and began to enter the walkway to the vestibule. At this time, the subject comes out, clearly becomes agitated, receives the officer's commands, drops a bag, produces a large kitchen knife, and starts advancing towards the officers. The officers gave numerous instructions to drop the knife, at which time he does not comply, and they discharge their firearms, striking the subject. And how do they spin this story? Community members and the family of a mentally ill man shot by police rallied for justice in the Bronx. They say the family called for help, not bullets. Over a dozen people were gathered outside the 52 precinct in the Bronx holding "Justice for Raul" signs and chanting "Justistica para Raul" as officers looked on. "Give us the names. Release the names. Give us the names of the trigger-happy cops that almost killed Raul and are still free," said one person through a megaphone. The family of 42-year-old Raul de la Cruz say he's mentally ill, and on March 26, his father called 311. "We just want justice for my brother, and we want the names of the police officers who did this to him." But officers arrived to his Bronx apartment, and police say they fired 28 seconds after De la Cruz, a father who loves to preach. We got scholars, we have teens, we have Michael Jackson impersonators. A father who loves to preach allegedly wielded a knife at them. "Why do you want to kill him?" Juliana Fuentes said. "I want what the family wants. We are demanding that they release the names of the officers who shot Raul, release the body cam footage, release the 311 call. We demand an end to the criminalization of mental illnesses." Okay, so this is insane. De la Cruz was insane. Okay, we don't want the police to come, but we want social workers to come so they can get stabbed to death by this crazy illegal who shouldn't even be here. Or, okay, let's say he is legal. Speak English! Is that too hard to ask? Apparently it's too hard to ask. But that's what they want. They don't want any police. They just want social workers to come and try to talk these mentally insane people out of something. And by definition, these people are mentally ill and not rational. But we're just going to skip over that. Lynn Walton said that people could also call the 988 line, specifically designed for mental health issues, but she noted that the only way that's currently available to ensure a quick response with emergency medical workers in tow is through 911. Something that mental health advocates are trying to change. Someone could appear intoxicated, but it could be because they're in really, really severe dehydration, which would warrant rapid medical attention. Yes, everybody, let's think to all the homeless kooks, all the mentally ill people on the subway that we've seen in these videos. Let's think of all the The crazy, erratic people who are threatening everyone around them, assaulting and terrorizing everybody. They're not drunk, they're not on something. It's because they're dehydrated. That's a lie. The danger with blaming mental illness. Despite their different takes, Kudish, Young, and Lynn Walton all express concern about the frequency with which violence is associated with mental illness in some media reports. That's their favorite word in this whole stupid thing is some. Some people, some experts, some media reports potentially increasing people's fears of those who appear mentally ill. And we don't want that. See, if you get motivated and you have enough of it, you're going to start choking these people out. And they can't have that. The terrorizing on the trains is the point. These people flooding the subways and harassing you is the point. And we don't want people to solve this. When there's a shooting, for instance, very often people will say that this is not a gun problem, it's a mental health problem. Now, if you think about that, he's saying no, it's a gun problem. Politicians across the country often link acts of violence to mental illness quickly after they take place. Looking at this trend, a 2019 study found that Americans have become increasingly likely to perceive people with mental health problems as a threat over time. The analysis compared responses to studies on perceptions of mental illnesses in 1996, 2006, and 2018. Following Neely's death, Mayor Adams has also been accused by some of fanning fear towards homeless New Yorkers who appear to have mental health issues. Don't believe your lying eyes. But Lynn Walton said she has also witnessed moments of kindness on the train, citing one example from deep in the pandemic. I was on the train home and there was a woman sobbing and she was saying, "I just need help. I just need help." And it was this beautiful moment, exactly the opposite of, I guess, the Jordan Neely incident, where the entire car said, "How can I help you?" So that's what we should have done with Jordan Neely. So what can we learn from this article? Well, 1, guns are off limits. 2, pattern recognition is off limits. Since we cannot be allowed to protect ourselves, we must be dependent on the state and its resources. But they too are not our savior because they could kill the person involved. As with everything in leftism, failure is not a sign to move on to a different strategy. It only ever means that we should double down on our current strategy. We should give even more money to the state. More money to failed mental health professionals who have done absolutely nothing to make a difference in the safety of public transit on the subway. More money to those failed people. Now, just a side note here. It turns out that Jordan Neely was on the city's radar. He was on the top 50 list of homeless people in the subway that social workers and mental health professionals were trying to reach. He was on a list informally known as the Top 50, a roster of people in a city of 8 million who stand out for the severity of their troubles and their resistance to accepting help. The list is overseen by a task force of city agency workers and social service nonprofits. When homeless outreach workers see someone who is on the list, in some cases, they are supposed to notify the city and try to get that person to a shelter. Despite that, and an open arrest warrant, Mr. Neely was out on his own on May 1st when he began ranting at passengers, which I guess is a very tame way of describing what that is and probably how those people felt. In the wake of Mr. Neely's death, the administration of Mayor Eric Adams has been criticized by advocates for homeless people and left-leaning political opponents who say that the killing highlights deep problems in the city's support systems for homeless people and those with mental illness. So another lesson is that even talking about the problem itself in neutral terms, like Eric Adams did, that's problematic. All solutions are off limits, and that's why we're in the mess that we're in. Leftism is unable to solve the logistical problems of real life, and that's why everything is disintegrating right in front of us. In a proper society, we would celebrate the fact that a person who is crazy, violent, and unable to be a productive and harmless member of society was put down like the sick dog that he was. We would build a statue of the guy who solved our problem. But it's opposite day, and so we mourn the loss of an abject loser and criminal, and we press charges against the man who did the right thing. We made a deal in modern civilization where we handed over the monopoly of violence to the state on the condition that they would keep us safe. But instead, crime and violence is allowed to prosper in the country at the moment. While everyone in authority looks on with their hands behind their backs, they broke their promise to us. And now we're forced to deal with the problems ourselves. And what are we met with? Criminal charges. We are not in a good spot right now. How long will it be before people just decide that it's not worth paying their taxes because we literally don't get anything in return? The only way that you could get the state and your tax dollars to somehow work for you would be to denounce your citizenship, go to Mexico, and then cross back over. Or be a Ukrainian. To be a productive, law-abiding, tax-paying citizen of the United States is to be a slave to the rest of the world. You only exist to make money to support the rest of the world. Europe can have its free healthcare because it doesn't have to allocate tons of money to defense like we do, not only for our own defense, but all of Europe's as well. Our taxpayer dollars largely go to Medicare, Social Security, defense, welfare, seemingly anywhere and everywhere that works against our interests. We pay for a Department of Homeland Security that coordinates with the Mexican authorities to let illegal immigrants into this country. Biden is allocating the National Guard to the border to not help with deportations or enforcement of the border, but rather to help Border Patrol agents process people through. We pay for a militarized police state. We pay for a corrupt government that actively colludes against us. We pay for a CIA that maintains the drug trades and imports tons of cocaine and heroin and fentanyl into our own country. We pay for an FBI that activates mass shooters. The profits we make for the corporations that employ us go to funding the left. We are slaves, and even as the illusion of democracy and liberalism and freedom disappears in front of us, we are stripped of the right to even defend ourselves against people who the state should have dealt with years before we had to. Yeah, Reagan closed down the mental institutions. We've heard that all the time. But you know what? That was 40 years ago. We just gave Ukraine $170 billion in 1 year. We've just always had that money floating around? Even if we didn't, our leaders are willing to go into that much debt in Ukraine before they even consider us? In 1955, there were 559,000 people in mental asylums in the U.S. Today, that number is at 35,000. The population in 1955 was almost 172 million people, but today the U.S. is at 330 million people. Think of the huge amount of crazy people on the street. I've been doing these thought experiments where I compare the horrors of yesteryear to the awesome conditions and conclusions that liberalism and progress has produced today. They claim that the mental hospitals were not in great shape, so we just had to close them. There's no other option. That was the right thing to do. The patients didn't receive great care. Oftentimes they had horrible procedures done to them. They were often abused. But can we honestly look at the major cities in America and say that this is any better? Letting them roam the subways and terrorize and assault people just trying to go to work is better? That through honoring their civil rights, we've made our cities better? We don't even hold their family members accountable. We just let these people roam the streets until they end up dead, and then we let their family get all the money on their GoFundMe. And then we let them say horrible things about this country. That's better than a subpar mental institution where they'd be contained? Letting drug addicts and the mentally ill poop and jerk off on the sidewalks in front of your kids and shoot up heroin and fentanyl and overdose? That's better? I recently read this article on the state of San Francisco. The author had befriended a security guard who kept texting him videos. He needed someone to see what he was seeing out there on his patch of Market Street between 5th and 6th. Did I know how the black markets worked? Had I walked down Market Street at night? Did I know that some of the street addicts were rotting, literally, their decomposing flesh attracting flies? Now, is that better than a subpar mental institution? The anthropology where he used to work announced it would close. What it really feels like living in San Francisco is that you're lying to yourself, he said. Oh, I live in San Francisco. It's so nice. When you walk by the junkies, you're like, they don't exist. They don't exist. You're lying to yourself. Liberalism requires us to lie to ourselves and others about the very nature of reality in order to keep up the delusion. And what is a better example of that than that article? We are all living in an unsustainable leftist delusion where they have no answers to any of the problems, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And you're not supposed to do anything. Don't put them in a chokehold. Don't accept any violence towards these people. Don't have any solutions. Just take it. Just run away. Get off the train, or ask them what their name is and be nice. Just have compassion. That's the solution? Call a social worker so that they can come and get stabbed instead of you. What does Jay Burden end his streams with? The lie can't last forever. So I'm going to steal that for this episode as well. This is a lie that just cannot last. Anyways, that's all the time I have for today. If you enjoyed this video and type of content I'm making, consider giving this video a like or maybe subscribing. If you want to support me and what I'm doing here, I have a Buy Me a Coffee in the description. I will see you all in the next video. Peace.